Right. Hello and welcome to the Sustainability Leadership Series. Today, I'm pleased to introduce you to Mary Stelletello, the founder of Vista Global Coaching and Consulting. This business, Vista Global Coaching and Consulting, is Wisconsin's longest certified B Corp. Mary loves to partner with organizations and individuals to make meaningful change. She has worked with more than 200 organizations and individuals in 30 countries across 6 continents, fostering organizational transformation. Today, we get to talk a little bit about the B Corp movement, Mary's thoughts on leadership development, and what you can do to break through your barriers and influence the change you want. So I'm very excited and eager to chat with you today. Mary, welcome to the series.
Thank you so much, Jessie. It's such an honor to have a deeper conversation with you. I know we've known each other for quite a few years, but those conversations have been, more transactional. So it's wonderful to be able to have some time to really explore all these important topics together.
Yeah, I know. I didn't know all this about your background. I mean, I knew you spoke different languages and traveled a lot. So it's exciting to get to pick your brain a little bit today. So why don't we share a little bit about your background and share with listeners a bit about your career path and work.
Okay, well, I'll try to make it short but it's a very interesting path. I actually, sort of started my career in family business as a 10-year-old. My dad had a restaurant, and at that early age, he really set me up to really start to build some of the skills that I have found later in my career have been really helpful. So observation, he would ask me to just sit and pay attention to what was going on. And then we would have a meeting after, a few hours. I think this was actually a way to have me stay out of his hair, but, it worked in other ways as well. What was I observing? What was I learning? And then, by the time I was 15, I was actually a manager of the restaurant. And so I was really having to build my people skills. And, I would spend time in the kitchen, and we had many immigrants from different parts of the world. So that's really where I started to really build my curiosity around different cultures and people from the Middle East and Latin America. And, by the time I was 25, I had my first executive director position working in the nonprofit sector. And I spent about 10 or 15 years working in the children and youth services, and runaway homeless youth services, children in foster care. And I worked internationally for a foundation for about 5 years, focusing on youth development, and worked, globally in that capacity. And then my last executive director role was with with a youth exchange organization that brought young people into the United States for a high school exchange experience. And, after that, I made a transition to the consulting side for nonprofits and social impact organizations and and foundations. And I worked for a national consulting firm in San Francisco, focusing on actually nonprofit mergers and leadership development strategy. And then that sort of led me into being maybe an accidental entrepreneur and starting my own consulting and coaching business in 2010. I started this global coaching and consulting, really doing similar work, working with nonprofits, social impact businesses, and doing coaching with leaders. And that's what I've been doing for the last, 12 years now.
Yeah, what a treat to get to know you better. So I didn't know we had this in common, but we both have father entrepreneurs. My dad is also a business owner. So I grew up from a very young age working in the business. And we also hosted several
great
exchange students growing up. Yeah, from various countries. What a wonderful experience.
Host families are the gem of our society, I will tell you, just from my experience in working in that world. Boy, you really do so much to bridge cultures and supporting young people. It's amazing. Yeah. So thank you for that service you've given.
Thank you. And, as I, age and see myself as an adult, I think about those experiences and yeah, what my family took on and realizing that, like realizing how unique and special that experience really was. And we still have great relationships with the students that we took in at that time. And I mean, of course, that ebbs and flows and there's distance, but thanks to tools today. But anyway, I know that's not what we're here to talk about, but I'm so excited to learn that about you. I had to that. So let's talk a little bit about the B Corp movement. Vista Global is one of Wisconsin's first certified B Corps. You are a co-founder of the Be Local Wisconsin group. Can you share why you chose to certify as a B Corp and a bit about the history and growth of the movement?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mentioned that I transitioned from the social sector and started working for a national consulting firm based in San Francisco. I was living out there at the time. And they were doing a research project in 2008 around the blurring of the sectors, meaning like the social sector or the nonprofit sector was starting to really lose the corner of the market on the do-good sector, like what was happening, just within business. And one of the areas that they really uncovered in that research was the growing B Corp movement, which was just starting at the time. B Lab started as a nonprofit and the movement in 2006. So I knew about the B Corp movement because of that work I'd done with the firm, and that recognizing, this movement was really challenging businesses to shift towards a stakeholder-driven model. So when I and maybe just a little bit about B Lab, and then I'll say why. Why did I become a certified B Corp? B Lab, as I mentioned, was founded in 2006, really created standards of verified social and environmental performance, transparency, and accountability. And I think the verification piece is really what really sets B Corps apart. The B Impact Assessment certification legally requires businesses to consider their impact and their decisions on workers, customers, community, and the environment. So when I decided to start Vista Global, I wanted to have that visibility of that commitment to those aspects of my work. So as an entrepreneur, you are your business. And when I founded Vista Global in 2010, I really wanted to align my personal values with the principles of my business. And I felt like there was no better way to have that visibility than to go through the certification process with the B Impact Assessment. So the certification is really an excellent way to show the world in a very transparent and verified way that you're committed to these practices, business practices across 5 different areas. And those areas are customers, governance, community, environment, and workers. So you have to do this assessment, and there's questions on all 5 of those areas. There's a scoring that you have to score, but a minimum of 80 points, total points 200. And then it's visible to the world. It's on the B Corp B Lab website, every single certified B Corp assessment there as far as their point score.
Wow, that's really great. I love that level of transparency, like you said, the verification, but also the attainability as a small business owner, right? Like we work with so many businesses of all sizes, and I think it's sometimes harder for a small business. You have to wear all of the hats. So to have the time and attention to really devote to this piece of it, I think, like you said, it really helps you stand out. And then I know, kind of the reason you created Be Local Wisconsin with the first sort of B Corps in Wisconsin was to kind of help build that movement. Can you share a little bit more about that history?
Yeah, sure. Well, so, as I mentioned, Vista Global certified, and our first certification was in 2012. And at that point, between 2012 2013, there were 3 B Corps in the state. And, everybody kind of was doing their own thing. There wasn't a large Be Local movement at that time. And what really was the motivation to launch the Be Local Wisconsin was that Wisconsin passed benefit corporation legislation. And this is an area that people can get very confused about because kind of everybody shorthands B Corps, and it can mean either a benefit corporate legal structure, or it could mean a certified B Corp. So that's why saying my company is a certified B Corp is the distinction, is certified. But many states, in fact, there's, I think, more than 35 now, as Wisconsin in 2017 was number 34. And I know there's maybe one or two since then, has now a legal structure. So, there can be S Corps, C Corps, and now benefit corporation, which is a designation under that, which is another pathway to say, hey, we care about stakeholder driven and stakeholder focused structure. So that law passed in late 2017. And so with that, we sort of used that as the springboard to launch the Be Local Wisconsin movement. And at that point, there were 7 certified B Corps. And we felt like an umbrella, hey, any benefit corporation or a certified B Corp, you can come to be part of this group, this movement in Wisconsin. And we're still that way right now, even though we now have 17 certified B Corps in the state. So there's been an exponential growth in the last, 5 years. We went from 6 to 17, which is pretty significant, even though 17 is not that many. Some states have hundreds. We have a larger umbrella of really looking at any businesses that are really committed to the interdependency. There is a what do I want to say, declaration of interdependency that the B Lab has put out. And so we sort of use that as a temperature taking for any business that's interested in being part of our movement here in Wisconsin, business as a force for good.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we have 4 members of WSBC that are certified B Corps. Marketing, Lakefront Brewery, Riverwater Partners, and Artisan Dental. So at least 4.
Yeah.
So some nice synergy there. One of them's on our board. So we really try to help promote what's happening in terms of, certified B Corp, the difference. I remember when I worked for Outpost Natural Foods, I think that's where we first met, actually, at a B Corp event there. Just really trying to understand the level of rigor that goes into it. And so I really see, WSBC as complementary to that movement. And also, our Green Masters program, I think, is a really good on-ramp to a B Corp certification.
Yeah.
Probably, really for any size or sector, because it really helps them to, I wanted to say design, but it's build in the processes, design the processes, systems for tracking that, you need in place for that level of rigor that the B Corp requires in terms of the verification process and all of that.
Yeah. And, Jesse, I have to say that, WSBC was instrumental in launching Be Local Wisconsin. When we first started, the board and, Tom Eggert as the outgoing executive director right before he was leaving, offered to host a page on your website to help, give visibility to Be Local. And so that partnership was really there from the very beginning of Be Local Wisconsin. And so, we were so grateful to be able to have that partnership. And I think you're absolutely right that the Green Masters program is an opportunity, for businesses to really start thinking about how do we, run our businesses in a more sustainable way, and thinking about some of those key, practices, policies to be instituting. And that's a great on-ramp to the sort of next level, where the B impact assessment actually looks at more, as I said, those 5 categories. So it's a broader view of all the business practices, and it's free. You can do the assessment and sort of use it as a guide for, wow, okay, maybe we want to work on our, our worker impact in, where we could be improving practices, policies, or in how we are treating our workers in a more sustainable way. And this could be kind of a roadmap in that regard.
That's great. That's great to know. So share a little bit more about what you think sets the leaders of B Corp apart from other companies or businesses.
Well, I think just building on what we were just talking about with respect to the 5 areas of the B impact assessment. As a leader of a certified B Corp and having gone through the rigor of the B impact assessment and looking at our governance structure, looking at, what are the practices or policies that we have in place and how are we treating our workers in sustainable ways? Who are our customers? Are we serving customers that are in underserved areas or underrepresented populations? How do we get back to the community? Are we doing volunteer work? Are we donating, a certain percentage of our profits to community? And what are we doing with respect to the environment, and how are we being sustainable, and how we look at the resources that we're using? So you approach decisions with those filters. And that way there's a more intentionality around how am I leading the organization or the business with that sort of comprehensive lens. And I really think that B Corp leaders are operating with a quadruple bottom line lens with people, planet, purpose, and profit. So sort of bumps up that complexity of how you think about how do we interact in the society with our business.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's 9 categories in the Green Masters program. It's only because we break out all the different environmental categories into separate categories. Yeah. But 2 also long taken the sort of environmental, social, and governance lens. And quite honestly, I look at the B Corp assessment, every year when I'm updating that to make sure that our program aligns with that, as well as others like Global Reporting Initiative and several others that are sort of setting the bar and the standard for sustainability across. But I definitely agree that the leadership for the B Corps is unique from several standpoints, but as you mentioned, bringing in that level of purpose and really weaving it into the fabric of the organization of like the purpose. I mean, that's the perfect word for it, right? It's just why you exist as an organization.
Yeah. Now, it doesn't mean, people may think, oh, well, there's only B Corps that are about changing the world in some way. I mean, but they all are. For example, there are law firms that are certified B Corps. Okay, so they're delivering, legal services. And they're delivering, a broad array of legal services, not only, potentially services that are looking at, justice, climate justice, or other types of, disadvantaged populations. So, and there are, many companies that are committed to this declaration of, a durable, prosperous economy for all in their own space.
Yeah, Mary, so I have a question from you. When I was looking at your website, you have a tagline, creating the world we want to live in. And I just resonated with that as sort of a vision person who really loves getting into crafting visions and honing that level. It spoke to me. So, and since this interview series is about leadership, right, I really believe that we have to take responsibility as leaders for our actions and what we want to create in the world. And I think that's the purpose that B Corps moved from, right, as a group, essentially, right? The tagline is force for good in the world, right? So what qualities do you think are required for that kind of leadership?
Thank you so much for asking. This is sort of one of my passion drivers of my work. And I've thought a lot about this over my career, and also thinking about how do you put this into practice and working with leaders. And, over the course of my career, I've had the opportunity to participate in leadership development programs. I was a member of an international fellowship when I was 30, and that really opened my eyes to a lot of different skills about how do you create change, globally. And I've also had the opportunity to design and facilitate leadership programs for social change leaders, here in Wisconsin and other parts of the United States. And, what I would say is some of the essential skills and practices that I believe are transformational for leaders, which then has this ripple effect for leaders and teams and organizations and ultimately the world, are the following. And what listening is fundamental, building empathy, and having empathy. And I'll break down each of these and I'll give you my thoughts and then I'll explain each of them just a little bit more. Conversational intelligence, which is probably something that people won't understand, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Cultural competence and understanding your own implicit bias. I feel like these kind of are like maybe my big five, if you will. So listening is fundamental skill for building trust. And I believe that any type of transformation happens because people come together and make change. And to do transformational work is very challenging. There has to be a high level of trust to do that kind of work. Empathy is another aspect of building trust. It's really standing under someone else's reality. And it allows us to bridge any kinds of differences that there may be between us. Again, also building the level of trust. Now, conversational intelligence is probably a concept that most of your listeners have never heard of. And so I'll just explain a little bit of it. This is a framework that was developed by a cultural anthropologist, Judith Glaser, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. But she conducted 30 years of research on the neuroscience of conversations and what happens in the brain when we're in conversations that are positive or negative, and how that affects the outcomes of whatever we're doing. And so in her words, this is, her tagline, which I share often, and I do a variety of different workshops and coaching in this area because I feel really committed to it. But in her words, she says, words create worlds. So having the ability to shift conversations that trigger defensiveness and fear to conversations that build healthy organizational environments, move organizations to greatness. Everything depends on the quality of conversations, and the high quality conversations have high levels of trust. So as I said, I had the opportunity to train with Judith, and I'm one of about 900 certified conversational intelligence coaches in the world. And these skills I feel are so important for leaders doing transformational work and doing work in sustainability or any kind of social change work is fraught with conflict or tension. And so those skills I feel are incredibly important. And the other two skills that I mentioned, cultural competence and understanding your own implicit bias, I feel are really initial steps and very important for us to be unlearning the structural and systemic racism that has formulated the architecture of capitalism, which in its current form does not create durable prosperity for all in our societies. And this sort of brings us back to one of the pillars of the B Corp movement, which is stakeholder capitalism.
Can you define stakeholder capitalism for those who may be new to that term?
Sure. So, when you think about corporations and in a certified, an S corp or a C corp, and you're incorporated, you have shareholders, right? Mm-hmm. And so your business practices and decisions are driven by what's best for your shareholders. Stakeholder capitalism broadens that. In fact, in the benefit corporation legislation in Wisconsin, it says that your decisions and management has to also take into account, one of a variety of community-focused stakeholders. So, whether that's the environment or that's disadvantaged populations or that is workers, et cetera. So stakeholder capitalism, and there's language that is required for all certified B Corps to include in their articles, whether you're a corporation or an LLC, and this is where it's broader for the B Corp certification, any type of business can become a certified B Corp, you have to embed in your articles of incorporation that you're committed to broader than shareholder outcomes and shareholder performance.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that definition. Thank you so much. Because we talk all the time about this in the sustainability world, right? About just stakeholders. We talk about it from an engagement standpoint. We talk about it from like understanding what's material to the organization. And so, right, there's so many stakeholders inside of our companies specifically, right? So customers, like you said, workers, the community, it might be shareholders, it might be a family, it might be an ESOP, so it might be all of the workers, right? But just taking the time to understand who your stakeholders are and what their perspectives are. I think that somewhat speaks to a level of maturity inside of a company, or just, a systems thinking type of approach. Absolutely. So yeah, thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
Part of the B Corp movement and certified B Corps.
Yeah.
And there's so much I could say about all the other things as well. I just, listening and, like you talked about the trust piece of it, just how important that is to move forward. I think sometimes as sustainability professionals listening, they might underestimate that need sometimes inside of a business environment, because it's sometimes harder to earn trust in that environment, across different levels in the organization. And so just kind of want to emphasize to them to remember that that's a very key strategy in building your rapport and your influence for, the change that you want or you're recommending for the company, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so, right, as a coach and, all of this great work you're so committed to, what leadership challenges are you helping folks overcome? And what are the most effective strategies and approaches for sort of driving the sustainable change?
Thanks for that question. It's been really fascinating in the last several years, like during the pandemic, I think really has resulted in a lot of shifting for leaders in thinking about how do I lead or what's important to me.
Yeah.
And so, leaders really recognizing when they were working from home that they couldn't compartmentalize their lives like they used to, they couldn't have work as work and home as home and sort of separate things and, kind of create structures around their different aspects of their life. And so that blurring in some ways actually became a bit of an awakening for people in recognizing, hey, I actually am a whole person. It really requires flexibility to do my best. And in also kind of recalibrating what is the right amount of work, because this sort of, also kind of tied back to the work that I, the learning that I got through the conversational intelligence work, because recognizing when your brain is overstressed with cortisol, and this is part of, Judith's work helps you explain that if you're in your primitive brain, which is where we are when we are very stressed, you cannot have quality conversations and you can't do quality work, because the prefrontal cortex was the front part of our brain, is where we have creativity, it's where we have empathy, it's where we have innovation, it's where we have strategy. So the pandemic has just provided an overlay of stress for everyone, right? So everybody's kind of bumped up on their stress level. And the awakening is like, I have to actually recalibrate my expectations for myself as a leader and what is realistic. And I also have to figure out new ways of bringing energy to myself first. So I think people recognize like sustainability as a whole different definition, in the sense that it starts with you as a leader. How do I sustain myself and my own energy? Because, and I actually started thinking about this concept of energy and managing your energy and not your time. Like we're always like, oh, we just need more time in the day. We need to be more productive. It's time management. But, more than 10 years ago, I came across some research by a professor, Tony Schwartz, who was at Harvard Business School, and he wrote an article called The Productivity Paradox. And he was working with companies on productivity, the question of how do we engage our workers so they can be more productive? Well, it actually was about energy. It wasn't about time. And, when you have energy and you feel energized, you're more productive. So what creates energy, what brings us energy is going to help bring us more sustainability. What gives us energy, what drains us for energy. And so recognizing I need this to bring more energy to myself, then I can be more sustainable. I can do more, do this work that's important in the long run. And so if we don't think about the energy level, what fills up our tank, what drains us first, we're not going to be sustainable. And therefore we can't sustain the work that we do. So it really starts with what is it that brings us energy? Small doses, maybe bigger doses, and really on an ongoing basis. We actually, for me, I know like every day I've got to be outside. I've got to walk my dog. That's like little doses of energy. It's sort of micro, medium or macro to build that sustainability within ourselves. So I've worked a lot with leaders over the last few years on that. How do we sustain ourselves first? How do you sustain yourself first?
Yeah, I think we can all relate so much to that. And it's so important and yet so historically overlooked. I think to your point, that's absolutely changing as a result of the pandemic, which has been one of our silver linings, right? But yeah, absolutely. I can relate to that as somebody who has to bring in energy, to an organization, to all of that. If you don't have it, where do you pull it from? And so what are those, I use this word core routines, like what are the core routines?
Yeah.
We need as leaders to make sure that we're filling our own bucket, to make sure that,
yes,
we're mentally healthy and well and physically healthy and well.
Yeah.
In addition, so that we have the strength and the courage to, withstand the work that we are passionate about and feel like, we are in desperate need as a culture and organization.
Right. Absolutely. And I think you really, Jesse, you touched on it, and Tony Schwartz touches on kind of the 4 quadrants: mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical. And you just touched on those. Like energy comes from lots of different places. And so you recognizing what is that for me and what are those rituals or routines I just need to build into my life. Yeah. And it's no compromises. Like this is part of who I am. Like I brush my teeth every night and, I put my phone in the kitchen, after, these are things that I do, right? Yeah. And I walk my dog every day, so it's those types of things that are not just negotiable, they're like essential.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's so important, Mary, is that, bringing those into the work culture and making those things a social norm instead of something that just the leaders get to do. It's something that all of us need and something that we all get to do. And this is so timely because I've been, it's so interesting now that we work in these remote settings so much more frequently. I've talked to numerous people over the last couple of weeks that were like, oh my gosh, I miss having to walk 10 minutes to the meeting or get in my car and drive because it's actually a mental break.
Yeah, right.
It's I have days like today and it's just back to back. It's Zoom all day long. It's, you don't necessarily have that downtime. So it becomes even more critical, for me specifically when I'm planning out my calendar and my week to make sure I walk break is part of my
absolutely calendar. It's on. I have Zoom free zone from 12 to 1 every day. And I've had that for 3 years. But before I blocked it off, it was like walk my dog. But now it's like Zoom free zone, like really, I'm just not taking any video calls during this time.
Yeah. Perfect, exactly. And we have to be okay with allowing that and building that as a culture. I know my husband, bring my husband in here, he was instrumental in his last employer and getting a meeting free day. He's just like,
Mm,
he ran production. He's like, I not only do I need to be with my people, like I needed time to disconnect, to think, to plan, to
right.
strategize, all of that. And not only do I need that, we all need that. And if we're
That's
just
right.
like saying that we can get on each other's calendars whenever we want, like that doesn't
Yeah.
set us up for success necessarily. Yeah, you might
And I think that
product.
argument of it's not just I need it, it's actually better for the
Yeah,
overall organization. Like this is a strategy that is success driven,
yeah,
right? It's not just, well, this is nice to have. It's
mhm,
actually strategic.
yeah, yeah. Great distinction. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, this has been such a great conversation, Mary. It's been so nice to get to know you more. Maybe share your website and where people can find you.
Yeah, for sure. So you can find a lot of information on some of the things that I touched on. My website is Vista Global CC, like coaching consulting.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I do have a podcast called Minutes with Mary, very short segments. I call them dog walking segments. And they talk, about like, I have a whole actually podcast mini series on conversational intelligence. So if people are interested in that, you could find there's a 6-part series on that, also on B Corp movement and coaching. And then with respect to Be Local Wisconsin, we also have a website, which is belocalwisconsin.org. Also have Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And if you're in Wisconsin, I think probably many of your listeners are, there is going to be a free Meet the Bees showcase on September 13th at Lakefront Brewery in Milwaukee. And so it's free. Registration is there on the website, either on Be Local or on the Vista Global website. So you could dive in even a little further on the bee scene if this piqued your interest.
Awesome. That's all so wonderful. I know I plan to attend that event in
Great.
September. So thanks for bringing that up. Absolutely. And I'm pretty sure under resources on our website, wisconsinsustainability.com, we still have the link to the Be Local page.
Oh,
so
good.
Reason people
Thank
forget
you.
where it is in the future. It is still on our website. And so I just want to remind folks that we have our member drive going on, and that membership is currently 40% off. So we invite you to join the movement for sustainability and a more just and sustainable world. Thanks so much again, Mary.
Thank you, Jessie. So great to have this time with you.